Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Medlock Post radio show. This is your host, Richard G. Medlock, sitting in the studios of the Medlock Post. We are, I sound kind of funny this morning. I have a plugged right ear, so with these headsets on, everything sounds weird. This is the All-American program where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. And this is where we stand for the red, white, and blue. Today is Easter Monday, April 10th, 2023. And this is episode 133 of the Medlock Post. The title of the show today is E Pluribus Unum. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I learned a new language over the weekend. That is not true. I did study Latin in college as a language, one of the languages, and I thoroughly enjoyed studying Latin. So, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Out of many, one. And we will talk about that a little bit later. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Yes, we have to get the legal stuff out of the way. You don't hear that on a lot of podcasts, do you? Yeah, but, my attorneys recommend that I do that. Number one, to protect the streaming providers, but also to protect me or anybody else. Because we get into some controversial items, like we're going to get in a couple today. And so we want to make sure we protect. Now, sometimes I haven't read it, and we're talking about something else. Busy day in history around the last few days. April 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th have been busy days in United States history. So let's do this chronologically. Actually, April 7th. Work our way through April 10th. April 7th, 1917, the United States of America declared war on Germany and entered World War I. Now, this was the war to end all wars, right? Yeah, well, it didn't do that. It just escalated everything. It created a military-industrial complex that continues to today. This was addressed by President Eisenhower. I don't think I have his soundbite on that speech about that, but I'll have to get it. But I've got it. I don't think I have it loaded into the system here. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was in the Army at the time and was sent to France. He fought in the Battle of Argonne Forest, was wounded, laid in the battleground in the mud and the rain, covering himself up with the bodies of his comrades that had passed away, so the Germans would not find him. He was also stricken with mustard gas, which affected his lungs the rest of his life and eventually took his life. The April 8th, 1913, on that date, April 8th, the 17th Amendment was ratified. That basically ruined federalism. It changed how senators to Congress were sent there. Under the original Constitution, they were elected by their state legislators to go to Washington to protect the states from the House of Representatives. It created a wall. The 17th Amendment, which was pushed by House, who was Woodrow Wilson's big Marxist advisor, they became elected by the people. And that wall of protection went down, and that's why people say this ruined federalism. Maybe tomorrow we'll start with that, or the next episode. April 9th, 1865, the Civil War, or the war between the states, ended. 4 years, 600,000 soldiers died on both sides. Well, total. We're still feeling some of those ramifications today, aren't we? They're tearing down Confederate statues. Any military base named after a Confederate soldier is being changed. It's interesting. On April 10th, today, in 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first African American to sign a Major League Baseball contract, and a few days later he began playing for the Dodgers, Brooklyn Dodgers at the time, at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. History was started. Satchel Paige came along after that, and several others. And the rest, as they say, is history. But what else happened on April 10th, 1970? Now, all you music fans will understand this. It feels like I'm talking in a bucket, folks. My right ear is plugged up with this headset on. Paul McCarthy announced and confirmed that the Beatles were breaking up. Folks, I remember that. I mean, it was just earthquake hit everybody. The Beatles breaking up. And there are many reasons why they did. Yoko Ono was one of them. But the Beatles broke up on April 10th. I'm just trying to think off my head. What was their last big hit before they broke up? Was it Let It Be? Was that their last big hit? Let It Be? I'll have to look it up. William Butler Yeats said this: "What a man does not understand, he fears. And what he fears, he tends to destroy." That's kind of an interesting comment. What a man does not understand, he fears, and what he fears, he tends to destroy. Now, that can be debated. Because let's look at today's world. The democratic Marxists, the globalist, and maybe it is true, they understand the Constitution. They understand the rule of law from the Constitution. But this is what a man does not understand. But they do understand it. And they still fear it. And they're trying to destroy it. Okay, we could have a debate on that. We'll have to work on that. Bring some people in. Have a debate. All right. Some quick things over the weekend. Beautiful Easter weekend. Worshiping as Christians, turning our thoughts to the crucifixion and the resurrection that affects everyone, no matter if you believe in Christ or not. You are benefactors from his great mercy and love. But things were happening contrary to Christianity and its basic values. It's interesting that on MSNBC, they mocked Christianity and the observance of Easter. They mocked it. You shouldn't mock any religion. You can disagree with it, but don't mock it. But they mocked it. Joy Reid was the biggest one. Budweiser announced, they came up with this campaign with the transgender, and it has caused Budweiser a lot of problems. But they're replacing the Clydesdales, cows dressed as horses. So Budweiser is replacing Clydesdales with cows dressed as horses. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, went on a warpath this weekend, telling the Biden and the Secretary of Health Human Services to disobey the ruling by the judge that put a halt on the sale of the abortion pill. Now, she went ballistic, folks. She went ballistic. So she's out there, and then the Secretary of Health Human Services came out. We need to just forget this, just ignore it. It didn't happen and move on. We're not going to obey this ruling. And AOC's out there, rambling her crazy stuff. And they're making it all about abortion. But folks, what was the ruling really about? See, this is where these theories that they come up with just fall apart in the face of fact. And the ruling was just temporary because the Biden administration can't appeal it. But see, they're going to appeal it on the wrong reason. The reason that the judge ruled to halt it had nothing to do with the legality or illegality of abortion. It had to do with the massive side effects of the pill, the safety of the pill. It has a bad record for bad side effects, even killing women. That was why the ruling. Hey, let's take a second look at this. Hey, FDA, haven't you done your homework? What's going on here? So, of course, they're making a political argument out of it versus a pharmaceutical argument that this is a bad pill. It hurts people besides killing an innocent baby. It's hurting the women. So you get the truth here, folks. That's why you come to be educated and empower. Riley Gaines, the swimmer from the University of Kentucky, we're going to get into this on another episode, was giving a talk about women's rights in sports at the University of San Francisco. And transgenders broke in, busted in, attacked people, shut the thing down, attacked her. She was beaten. She was hit. They finally got her out of there. The police got her to a room where she was for 3 hours waiting for it to settle down. Like I said, we'll get into that. What's going on there with this transgender thing? Ayn Rand, and this is so fitting for what's going on today in America, Ayn Rand said, hatred of the good for being the good is the hallmark of the 20th century. This is the enemy we are facing. Hatred of the good for being good. That says a lot, folks. That says a lot. So much. There's so much to talk about today. But let's get going here. E pluribus unum. We'll get to it after we talk about the Bilderberg Group. I mentioned this the other day. We were talking about the Trilateral Commission, and I kind of hit the highlights on this. There was a book written in 2005, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, by Daniel Estulin. And in 2014, Stephen Lindman from Global Research wrote an article, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group and What They May Be Planning Now. Now, you can find this article through a search engine. Make sure you put in Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N, Lindman, L-E-N-D-M-A-N. The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. Don't do it under Daniel Estulin. All you'll see there is all the attacks on him as being a wacko conspiracy nut, because he came out with the truth. Daniel studied the Bilderberg Group for 14 years. All right. In 1954, the most powerful men in the world met for the first time in Oosterbeek, Netherlands, debated the future of the world, and decided to meet annually in secret. We say, why in secret? Well, we'll get to that. But what was going on in 1954? 1954, Joseph Stalin had just died, or died that year. Nikita Khrushchev, who was basically worse than Stalin, became the premier of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the communist state. Basically, the Cold War started around this time. Communism had taken over China in 1947 and was moving forward here. Mao Zedong was murdering a bunch of his people after he took their guns away. The United States started between 1954 and 1956 inserting itself into Vietnam. You go, wait a minute, we didn't go in until the 1960s. And you would be wrong. We started getting involved in the 50s under orders by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, how do we know that? From the Pentagon papers that were leaked, released by Daniel Ellsberg in the 1970s and 71. He used to work in the Pentagon. And this detailed all the office dealings the United States did concerning Vietnam, and it was ugly. We'll get it. That's another story in itself. Also, what was being revealed in 1954 was the 45 goals of the Communist Party of the USA in conjunction with Russia, communist, to destroy America and Western civilization. This is what was happening. We had just gotten over World War II. Russia was just now getting their nuclear weapons and tried a few years after that to put them into Cuba, which led to the Cuban crisis in 1962, which we were that far away from a nuclear war with Russia. Everybody, I remember that. We were all sitting on pins and needles during that, especially in South Carolina, because we were pretty close to Cuba as far as those missiles were concerned. So, and there were a whole lot of other things going on. There were wars in Africa. The Middle East was still in turmoil. We were trying to get our oil production lined up, reestablish the economy after World War II. So there were a lot of things going on. So these powerful men decided, hey, let's form a group. And let's meet annually, but let's do it secretly. They call themselves the Bilderberg Group, with a membership representing a who's who of world power elite, mostly from America, Canada, and Western Europe. Now, there are those from Asia now and the Middle East and Africa. So I think all continents are included, including India and Pakistan. World power elites. David Rockefeller was one of the founders. Henry Kissinger, who later became the Secretary of State under Richard Nixon, and who is a globalist, still out there today promoting globalism. Bill Clinton became a member. Gordon Brown, who was at that time the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Angela Merkel, the Prime Minister of Germany. Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke, who were Fed chairman. Larry Summers, who was Secretary of the Treasury. Tim Geithner, Lloyd Blankfein, George Soros. Everywhere you look, when you start looking at globalist organizations, whether it's the Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, are owning district attorneys in the United States, George Soros and his organizations pop up. Now, his son is basically running the thing now. Donald Rumsfeld, who has held key positions. Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News. Influential senators, heads of state, parliamentarians and congressmen, Pentagon, and NATO brass. NATO was key in putting this organization together and still is. Members of European royalty, selected media figures, and invited others, some quietly, by some accounts, like Barack Obama and many of his top officials, as well as those in the Biden administration today. Now, the last World Economic Forum, which I said the other day, is their front, and Barack Obama and John Kerry had key roles, and Al Gore had key roles in their last meeting. And then you bring in top figures from the Council on Foreign Affairs, the CFR, International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, Trilateral Commission, which was organized in 1927, which we talked about last week. Remember, they've declared 2023 as year one of the New World Order. Powerful central bankers and those from the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, their leaders, and Bank of England's members. Now, I don't. If I mentioned the names of people back then, you're not going to recognize them. For over half a century, no agenda or discussion topics became public, nor is any press allowed into these meetings. No press conferences. No one that's in these meetings can talk to anybody outside. Now, Esterlin undertook an investigative journey that became his life work. He states, slowly, one by one, I have penetrated the layers of secrecy surrounding the Bilderberg Group, but I could not have done this without help of conscientious objectors from inside as well as outside the group's membership. All of those names confidential. Whatever its early mission, the group is now a shadow world government threatening to take away our right to direct our own destinies by creating a disturbing reality very much harming the public's welfare. In short, Bilderbergs want to supplant individual nation-state sovereignty with an all-powerful global government, corporate-controlled and checkmated by militarized enforcement. They've achieved many of their goals. This is a private club of the most powerful people in the world. And it has spread and it's gained in power or deep. Just look at corporations. Chase Manhattan Bank. Jamie Dimon came out the other day, and he's probably part of this because he's very powerful. He came out the other day and said that the United States government, to curb the climate crisis, needs to start taking private property away. We need to get property out of people's hands. Now, he's taking a lot of heat on that one. He might back off that statement. I don't know. But he said, the United States government needs to start taking all this property away. See, this goes back to the United Nations movement to try to get everybody crammed together in areas and open up all the rural land for them to manage. This is why China's out there buying up all this land, so is Bill Gates. It's another story. Bilderbergs decided to create an aristocracy of purpose between Europe and the United States to reach consensus to rule the world on matters of policy, economics, and overall strategy. NATO was essential for their plans to ensure perpetual war and nuclear blackmail to be used as necessary, then proceed to loot the planet, achieve fabulous wealth and power, and crush all challengers to keep it. Wow. Wow. Now, they're doing this. Do we see perpetual war going back to the military-industrial complex? Yeah. Do you see one of the purposes behind Russia invading Ukraine right now? Has nothing to do between those two countries. It has to do with a global movement here. Nuclear blackmail. How many times has Putin threatened to use nuclear weapons? They're using this for many different reasons. And one of them is to bring down the United States. We're going to talk about the dollar. I hope we have time to talk about it. The dollar's not going anywhere, folks. All right. Dollar's not, we're not going to be de-dollarized, like they're saying. Along with military dominance, controlling the world's money is crucial, for with it comes absolute control, as the powerful 19th century Rothschild family understood. As a patriarch, Amschel Rothschild once said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." Are we seeing that in America? We're trying to see it, aren't we? We're trying to see the democratic Marxists get control of everything and to put the common man down, to put them in their place. As Obama says, surrender yourselves to the all-powerful, is what Obama says. I'm going to go play that again. And for those of you that have not heard this, let me scroll down. I had it set for my next. I've got to get past the MNOP. All right, where are you, Obama? There you are.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build. Ordinary men and women are too small-minded to govern their own affairs. That order and progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.
Surrender your rights to an all-powerful sovereign. The international order. This is his speech at the UN. This is in his second term. He was shooting to become the president of the UN. Okay, he's not there yet. Don't rule him out yet. To get into this thing, the steering committee has to invite you. Apply. And when you go, even the president of the United States, the CIA, Secret Service, bodyguards, whatever, do not go in. I mean, they have armed guards around this place, wherever they meet. But your bodyguards don't go in. It is that secret. They use Chatham House rules, which means you're free to say whatever you want without repercussions. If you want to disagree, you disagree. Now, how do they work? Let's talk about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton attended in 1991. Really? He was the Arkansas governor. And he was running for president. And he had a meeting with David Rockefeller. And David Rockefeller told him why the North American Free Trade Agreement was a Bilderberg priority and that the group needed him to support it. Well, guess what? The next year, Clinton was elected president. And on January 1, 1994, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, took effect. Now, what did that do? That hurt America. We had plants shutting down and moving to Mexico or other places to get cheap labor, get away from regulations, and it hurt manufacturing and jobs in America. Now, Trump redid this to bring manufacturing back to America, and it was working until Joe Biden got in office. The group's grand design is for a one world government or a world company with a single global marketplace, policed by one world army, and financially regulated by one world central bank using one global currency. Now, that's a big wish list, isn't it? Yeah, it is a big wish list. They don't want a middle class. They only want rulers and servants. What does that sound like, folks? That's right. Communism. Some of you probably said socialism. It's the same thing, folks. A zero growth society. Only the rulers get rich and powerful. Us serfs, us servants, we don't get nothing. And if we don't obey and bow and scrape to their altar, we might get beheaded. The UN will become the de facto world government, imposing a UN tax on world citizens. Well, we saw that. Janet Yellen last year presented to the group of 20 this 15% corporate tax, universal international corporate tax, and they approved it. It's in place on top of your taxes in your country. Imposing a universal legal system. Well, we're seeing what kind of legal system these people want. It's it's not a rule of law, it's ruler's law, and they make it up as they go along. And in our next episode, I'm going to address that issue again about ruler's law, so you further understand what's going on. Then the Bilderberg partners with the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR. Now, one of its 1921 founders, Edward Mandell House, was Woodrow Wilson's chief Marxist advisor. He helped create the Federal Reserve. He helped create the 16th and 17th Amendments to control people. Now, the Federal Reserve Act was not passed until December of 1913. The 16th Amendment was ratified in February, and I just told you that on April 8th of 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified. All these things, all of them are falling into place. So the Bilderberg Group wants to build on them. These were built out of Marxism. People just fell in love with Karl Marx, and they were replacing freedom, teaching freedom in the universities, with teaching Karl Marx. The Trilateral Commission was created in 1927, founded by David Rockefeller. Boy, he's a busy person. Busy person trying to control the world. So the next time you watch something from Rockefeller Plaza in New York, understand that that stuff was created by a man who wanted a one world government and continues. His descendants are still part of this. Now, he was also a leading Bilderberger and CFR chairman emeritus. So here's David Rockefeller, Trilateral Commission founder, the Council for Foreign Relations chair emeritus, and part of the Bilderberg Group. You don't get more powerful than that on a worldly sense. Wow. So we have a lot of past presidents and congressmen and senators, key members of the Fourth Estate, the media, and their bosses, top officials of the FBI, CIA, NSA, National Security Association, Defense Establishment, the DOD, DOJ, they're all part of this. The CFR has served as a virtual employment agency for the federal government. This is how the deep state was created, to undermine the Constitution. Whoever occupies the White House, CFR's power and agenda have been unchanged since its 1921 founding. Remember, Woodrow Wilson is the one with direction from Mendel House, what was his name? House is his last name. I always forget this guy's name. It's really important. I always forget it. Where is it? It's supposed to be right here. I always lose it. Anyway, never mind. But his name was House. He and Woodrow Wilson put these things into place. They put into place, after World War I, at the Versailles Treaties, a package to go in to create a one world order. But the other nations wouldn't have anything to do with it because they thought the United States would become so powerful it would control everything. And then under Woodrow Wilson and House, it would have. Now, they created at the time the League of Nations, which became the United Nations later on. Do you see how all of this has come together? So between NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, the central banks, NATO, corporations buying into this, media part of this, you wonder why we have a situation we're in today? They want to develop a global welfare state where obedient slaves will be rewarded and nonconformists targeted for extermination. Now, I want to be beheaded. I want the guillotine, folks. And there's a reason I can't say it over there, though. Here it is, Edward Mandell House. Edward Mandell House. The Henry Kissinger said this in 1992 Bilderberg Group meeting. Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all people of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. Individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. Henry Kissinger, 1992, and he stands by those words. And he was Secretary of State, folks, under Nixon. And everybody keeps turning to him for advice and counsel. I think he spoke at the last World Economic Forum, or was part of a panel, I should say. And don't forget Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Council of Foreign Affairs founder, Paul Warburg, was a member of Roosevelt's brain trust, his brain trust. And in 1950, his son, James, told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, "We shall have world government whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent." This, folks, is what's happening, has been happening. So when we talk about the deep state, it's worldwide. State controls, they claim, Supreme Court and other federal judge nominees. They tell the president who they want. Well, they didn't tell Trump. He wouldn't listen to them. And his nominees were attacked viciously. According to Professor William Domhoff, author of Who Rules America, the CFR operates in small groups of about 25 who bring together leaders from the 6 conspirator categories: industrialists, financiers, ideologies, ideologues, military, professional specialists, lawyers, medical doctors, etc., and organized labor for detailed discussions on specific topics in the area of foreign affairs. The Council on Foreign Relations, while not financed by government, works so closely with it that it is difficult to distinguish council action stimulated by government from autonomous actions. Its most important source of income are leading corporations and major foundations, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Ford Foundations, to name 3, and they're directed by key corporate officials. Wow. The Rockefeller family wields enormous power, even though David is gone. But his legacy with his family lives on. The Rockefellers had the greatest influence over the media for years. They could sway public opinion. They knew they could create the pulse for public opinion, and they gained deep influence in politics. And with this politics of subtle corruption, they are taking control of the nation and now aim for total world domination. The Bilderberg-Rockefeller scheme is to make their views so appealing by camouflaging them that they become public policy and can pressure world leaders into submitting to the needs of the masters of the universe. The free world press is their instrument to disseminate agreed upon propaganda. Now, folks, I've just hit the tip of the iceberg. This is going to have to be picked up on another episode because we're running out of time. But I wanted to get to e pluribus unum. I don't know if I'm going to have time to get to the dollar today. I might. Today, we have "In God We Trust" as the official U.S. motto. And that was by an act of Congress in 1956. Eisenhower signed it into law. When the United States was created and they created the Great Seal of the United States, e pluribus unum was basically put on there as a de facto motto. It wasn't, nobody voted on it. Nobody just said, hey, let's put this in here. It seems like it works. Out of many, one. Which they were looking out of many colonies, out of many states, one government. So that's why they looked at it. Now, when was "In God We Trust" first used? It was used during the Civil War in 1864, and it was on the 2-cent piece, and it initially appeared on coins, the 2-cent piece. That's when things didn't cost much. But it became accepted among many Americans. Now, in the 1950s, it grew on postage stamps. The motto appeared on many, many places. and then it was passed by the 84th Congress. And we see it on all our money. In God we trust. It's also the motto for Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi. So, e pluribus unum, and in God we trust. And that's what we need to be looking at today. In God we trust. Not the altar of socialism or Marxism or leftism or progressivism or even conservatism. We need to be looking to the altar of God. He is our ruler. He is merciful to us. He blesses us with the things we don't deserve. But He takes care of us. He's watching over this nation. Now, let me just make these quick points. Last episode, I talked about the dollar being under attack from around the world, from Saudi Arabia, China, BRIC, on and on and on. These reports that you're seeing are to scare you. The dollar is in great shape right now. But it's under attack. Its greatest enemy, and we'll get into this in the next episode, is our own government, the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. Those are our two biggest enemies against the dollar. That's right. Our biggest enemy is within the United States, and it's been like that for almost 100 years now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have sadly come to the close of this episode. We're going to pick up some of these issues going forward. There's so many things to talk about and to help you understand. St. Augustine said, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose and it will defend itself." And that is true. And Ezra Taft Benson said this, "God first, we are easily deceived by crafty men who profess a great love for our humanity while advocating programs that are not of the Lord." And that, folks, is the Medlock Post radio show for today, April 10th, 2023. May God bless America.